Now you've learned the high-level strategy you can use to find and close sponsors. But if you're still focused on getting sponsors to understand the value of your event, you're approaching it the wrong way. To win high-value brands, you need to get them to understand the value of your attendees. Companies want a return on their investment, and your ability to deliver that ROI makes or breaks your deal. That return isn't based on how cool your event was. It's based on how many of your attendees they reached and engaged. Here are my insider tips to use audience data to attract big brands.
Audience data is the key to high-value sponsorship. I'm going to repeat that. Audience data is the key to high-value sponsorship. In the absence of audience data, you do not have a sponsorship opportunity. If you cannot define your audience with 20 to 30 data points, you have work to do, right? Just saying, oh, it's 50-50 men and women who are middle class living in Chicago. That is not an audience. Sponsorship is always this property, right? Your event or your spot, your naming right, your facility, what it is that you're selling sponsorship for brings in a very specific audience, and that audience is of interest to a prospect. So sponsorship always moves from property to audience to prospect, and that's how your sponsor comes on board. Never this, property directly to prospect. So what does this mean exactly? Well, let's say you run a gala that's going to raise money for a local children's hospital. In this case, your gala raising money for a local children's hospital brings in a particular audience, say 40-year-old high net worth moms who live in the suburbs, and then you use that audience to reach out to a prospect who wants to sell products to them. This does not make sense. We're going to run a gala that will raise money for a local children's hospital. Hey, local car dealership, you should be at this event because we're going to raise money for the community. Well, car dealership says, well, I need to sell cars. You say, oh, but we're going to raise money to help the kids. Doesn't work that way. If instead you say, we have a gala bringing in 40-year-old high net worth moms who live in the suburbs with 2 or more kids who prefer luxury cars, now the prospect wants to be at your property because they care about selling luxury cars. In fact, they have to sell 25 this month to that target market. You use your property to bring in an audience. You use your audience to bring in a prospect. So I want to share with you a story from the field. I was running a cause marketing campaign. And the goal was to drive web traffic to the sponsor or the corporate supporter's website. The idea was that every person who visited the website and took a very specific action, they would donate $5 to our organization. Well, as it turns out, we made it too complex for people to engage in this campaign. So it was a complete failure. A complete and utter failure. We were supposed to get 5,000 people to engage in this activity. We got 107. However, we tracked media. We did some media monitoring. We gave out samples and we tracked when people used those samples. We looked at web traffic through Google Analytics, conversion rates that were reported back to us from our corporate partner. We looked at social media reach. Despite raising no money and only having 107 people engage in this action, we were able to prove to our corporate partner that we connected them to their target audience. So despite the fact that it was a complete failure in terms of actually getting the donations that we were after, we actually delivered on the audience. And what happened? Our corporate partner gave us the $25,000 and signed on for a 5-year partnership, right? Therefore, a total of $150,000 when all was said and done, despite the fact that we failed. You see, it wasn't about the cause. It wasn't about helping XYZ individual. It was about connecting our partner to their target audience. And if you can prove that you've done that, you're really growing your brand and proving that you're deserving of sponsorship revenue, sponsorship dollars. Remember, sponsorship is about marketing and sales. Marketing and sales require a very specific action or goal. And an action or goal requires a particular individual or group of people to do something. In the absence of that audience, you can't prove whether or not people took a particular action to achieve a very specific marketing goal and to therefore prove the ROI of your sponsorship. So here's why audience matters. The general public and, quote, everyone is very low value. And newsflash, no sponsors are targeting, quote, the general public or the country or, quote, everyone. No sponsors are targeting the general public. No audience, no valuation. If you can't prove your value, you're in big trouble. You don't have a sponsorship opportunity. A business to business or VIP crowd are worth 200% to 1,000% more than the general public or more. You want to identify these very specific audiences, these niche or niche audiences. 50 attendees, just 50 who control corporate budgets, are worth so much more than a room full of even high net worth people. So for all of you folks out there who are running conferences where you have groups of business people who are involved in making any purchases within their business, you have a very, very valuable opportunity. The riches and the niches. So this is not my quote. This is something that I've sort of heard in the marketing circle. So I'm Canadian. You may have detected my accent already. We don't say niche in Canada. We say niche. In fact, the Commonwealth does not say niche. They say niche, but it doesn't rhyme. So I like to pronounce this like our American cousins, the riches and the niches. The idea is that you want to find your niche or niche audience, the smallest audience you can possibly identify. And that is how you monetize sponsorship. So no longer do you have to say things like, I don't have a sponsorship program because we're not as big as ... How big you are is irrelevant. How niche or how niche you are is highly relevant. But you know what? Don't take my word for it. Seth Godin, brilliant marketer, just so happens to have built the marketing programs for or strategies for many of the companies from whom you want sponsorship. Highly influential marketing thought leader. This is a quote from his blog. The solution is simple but counterintuitive. Stake out the smallest market you can imagine. This goes against everything you learned in capitalism school, but in fact, it's the simplest way to the matter. When you have your eyes firmly focused on the minimum viable audience, you will double down on all the changes you seek to make. Your quality, your story, and your impact will all get better. Going back to that car salesperson, do you think that they're more interested in getting their car's brand in front of 50,000 Americans or Canadians or 50,000 Bostonians, or the 50 people who plan to buy a new luxury car within the next 6 months, right? The answer is obvious. And that is how sponsorship works. So I want to share with you, part of our work is actually harvesting audience data. And so I want to share with you some of the things that we're able to actually produce and tease out of various databases. And I'm going to show you how to do this. So this is actually, I've changed some of the numbers, but this is straight out of a client that we worked with recently. So we know about their audience that 51% are 55 and older, 69% are female, 22% have participated in their event in the last 3 years. This percentage make $150K a year, no children, 21% bank with Bank of America, 19% with TD, 17% with XYZ Bank, 21% drive Toyota, then Ford, then Honda. 34% use Rogers, Bell, and TELUS, telecommunications. 61% plan to take 3 or more vacations per year. 62% US, 30% Europe, 22% Caribbean. 61% are coming to Canada, but hopefully not in the winter. Respondents were most comfortable with pharma, retail, and financial services as sponsors. Now, let's say you're sitting in front of a sponsor and all you have to say is we have 50 people or 1,000 people who come to our event and we're pretty sure they enjoy the event. And across the table is someone who can say this. And let's say you're at Bank of America. You don't know how many people bank with Bank of America in your database, but your competitor does. You're in big trouble. In the next 18 months, 36% will buy new vehicles, 12% will switch banks, 10% will apply for a mortgage. I want to stop on the mortgage number here. If you know that 10% of your database plan to apply for a new mortgage, even if you only have 1,000 people in your database, times the multiplied by the average cost of a mortgage in your geography, you could, even with 1,000 people in your database, have a multi-million-dollar sales pipeline for a mortgage company. right? These are incredibly valuable stats and you have to be collecting them. Sponsors want to know this and a whole lot more, but it also guides your prospecting. 54% will renovate their home, 80% plan to stay in a hotel, 81% will buy airline tickets, 56% will buy insurance, 82% will book a vacation. But none of this really matters if you don't know whether or not you can even influence buying decisions in your audience. So you got to ask. 86% would change a purchase based on sponsorship of this property. So 1,000 people in your database, 10% plan to buy a new car, get a new mortgage. 10% plan to get a new mortgage. 86% of them would actually change a purchase based on sponsorship of your property. That is a powerful demographic that you can present to a sponsor. Now imagine yourself at a car dealer. 23% of your database drives Toyota, 19% drives Honda, a quarter of them plan to buy a new car in the next 18 months, 85% live in the area, 86% would change a purchase based on sponsorship of your property. Do you think that Toyota and Honda will take your meeting, even if you only have 100 people in your database? The answer is yes. So how the heck do you get this information? You know, as a consultant, we're told that we're supposed to tell everyone all of this information is highly proprietary, impossible to get. The only way to get it is if you hire a consultant who knows all the secrets. Well, today is your lucky day because I'm going to show you exactly what we do to collect this information. Pro SurveyMonkey account, which you can get for $350 a year. We have no affiliation with SurveyMonkey. It just happens to be the one we use. But ultimately, any survey tool where you can break down audiences by which question they answered works. 2 e-blasts to the database, just 2. Chance to win one of 3 $25 gift cards gives us enough respondents to have 30 plus data points, 95% confidence interval within a 5% margin of error. That's it. So total cost $425. That's what you need in order to get the information that I've just shown you. Now add to that the data collected through social media, the data collected through your Eventbrite account, the data collected just from your own experience of people at your events, and you have a well-rounded knowledge of your database, of your audience. So I want to share with you a case study. I was working on with an organization who teach young people like grade 6 to 12. So teenagers, more or less, financial literacy, how to make good business decisions. Question: do you think the big banks would be interested in sponsoring an organization that teaches financial literacy to high school students? Well, the answer is yes. They sure were. In fact, to the tune of $25,000. However, the problem is this bank took a year to close that $25,000. It took a dozen meetings, 12 meetings and applications. It included impact reporting and how many kids we were going to help. It included a ton of follow-up. The sponsor only signed for 1 year at a time, right? So very, very painful. Took a long time to close this money. We sure got it. But the problem was it's not sustainable. And then we realized that the rich is in the niches. We looked at our volunteers. So we were helping 10,000 students learn financial literacy through about 150 volunteers. They were up and coming professionals. They controlled small budgets, highly mobile, of interest to recruiters. Some were partner track, being groomed for leadership. Do you think the big banks were interested in our 150 volunteers? Of course they were. To the tune of $30,000 a year. One phone call with the sponsor to close that $30,000. No proposal, no application, no online form. The sponsor activated, which paid for hard program costs. In other words, they decided they wanted to train and recruit all of our volunteers for us, which was our second biggest challenge and single biggest cost. So not only did it give us 30 grand a year for 5 years, they also underwrote the costs, hard program costs. All I had to do was provide a fulfillment report proving that we delivered. 150 volunteers brought in 30K times 5 years, or 10,000 students, 25K a year with a dozen meetings. Which would you rather do? Well, the truth is both, but it proves the point. that once we realized and determined who our true audience was and who our niche audience was, we saw a significant increase in revenue, more than doubled our revenue.
Now that you understand how vital audience data is to winning sponsors, it's time to learn to gather the data you need. In the next reading and assignment, you'll use technology like Google Analytics and Facebook Insights to illustrate your audience.